The clock reads 11:47 p.m., and in a quiet loft somewhere in the countryside, a small drama is unfolding that will echo across 500 kilometers of open sky tomorrow. Our story begins here in this moment of stillness before the storm, with a bird we'll call Aurora, a 3-year-old blue checker hen whose racing career has been building toward this very weekend. She doesn't know it yet, but in less than 8 hours, she'll be released into one of the most demanding challenges nature can offer, a 500-kilometer race across landscapes that will test every fiber of her being, every instinct honed by millions of years of evolution. Right now, Aurora sits quietly on her perch, her head tucked slightly under her wing, in that peaceful pose that racing pigeons adopt when all is right in their world. But there's something different about tonight. The routine has been subtly altered. Her fancier, David, made his final visit to the loft an hour earlier than usual, checking water levels, ensuring the ventilation is perfect, speaking in those soft, reassuring tones that experienced pigeon racers know their birds respond to. The subtle changes in routine don't go unnoticed by Aurora and her loft mates. There's an electricity in the air, a sense of anticipation that these remarkable birds seem to pick up on long before humans realize they're broadcasting it. The preparation for a 500-kilometer race doesn't begin the night before, it begins months, sometimes years earlier. Aurora's journey to this moment started when she was just a squeaker, her training flights gradually extending from a few hundred meters around the loft to 20 kilometers, then 50, then 100. Each flight has been building her stamina, her confidence, her intimate knowledge of a landscape she calls home. But tomorrow's race will push her beyond anything she's experienced before. 500 kilometers, that's roughly the distance from London to Edinburgh, from New York to Cleveland, from Paris to Stuttgart. For a bird weighing less than 500 grams, it's an odyssey that would challenge even the most seasoned ultramarathon runner. As dawn breaks at 4:30 a.m., David enters the loft with the kind of quiet purposefulness that speaks of decades of experience. The basketing process is about to begin, and if you've never witnessed this ritual, it's something that stays with you. Aurora and 19 other birds from David's loft have been selected for today's race, not randomly, but based on their form, their recent training flights, their bloodlines, and that indefinable quality that experienced fanciers learn to recognize, the look in a bird's eye that says they're ready for something special. One by one, David gently catches each bird, his practiced hands moving with the kind of fluid confidence that comes from handling thousands of pigeons over the years. Aurora's turn comes 7th. She doesn't struggle. These birds have been handled regularly since they were young, and there's a trust between fancier and pigeon that's beautiful to witness. David's fingers briefly check her breast muscle, feeling for that perfect balance between fitness and condition. Too thin, and she won't have the reserves for 500 kilometers. Too heavy, and the extra weight will slow her down when every gram counts. Aurora passes this final test with flying colors. Her muscle is firm and full, her weight exactly where it should be for a race of this distance. Into the racing basket she goes, and here's where the story becomes even more fascinating. These aren't ordinary pet carriers. Racing baskets are marvels of engineering, designed to keep birds comfortable and secure during transport while allowing for proper ventilation and just enough movement to prevent stiffness. Aurora finds herself in a compartment with familiar faces, birds she's trained with, competed against, and shared the loft with for years. There's Titan, the cock bird from the section next to hers, known for his incredible finishing speed. There's Whisper, a young hen making her debut at this distance, her nervous energy almost palpable. And there's Old Blue, a veteran of a dozen 500-kilometer races, sitting calmly, as if this were just another training toss. The journey to the release point begins at 5:15 a.m. The convoy of trucks carrying nearly 2,000 birds from dozens of lofts winds its way through sleeping towns and awakening countryside. Aurora experiences this journey through a different sensory world than we do. Her hearing picks up frequencies we can't detect, her eyes process visual information at rates that make our perception seem sluggish by comparison, and her inner compass, that mysterious biological GPS that we're only beginning to understand, is already taking readings, storing information that will prove crucial in 8 hours' time. The release point is a carefully chosen location 500 kilometers northeast of the home lofts, selected for its open terrain and favorable wind conditions. As the convoy arrives at 7:45 a.m., there's a bustling energy among the fanciers and club officials. Baskets are unloaded with military precision, arranged in long rows under the already warming morning sun. The birds inside are remarkably calm. It's as if they understand what's coming and have accepted it with the kind of stoic courage that defines their species. But here's something most people don't realize about the hour before release. This is when the real magic begins. Aurora and her fellow racers aren't just sitting passively in their baskets. Their extraordinary senses are already working, gathering the information they'll need for their homeward journey. They're listening to the sounds of this new place, feeling the magnetic signature of the Earth beneath them, noting how the sun sits in the sky at this particular latitude and longitude. Most remarkably, they're beginning to construct what scientists call a cognitive map, a mental representation of their position relative to home that will guide them across hundreds of kilometers of unfamiliar territory. At precisely 8:30 a.m., the liberation begins. This is the moment every racing pigeon fancier lives for, the explosion of wings against sky, as hundreds of birds pour from their baskets in a display that never fails to take your breath away. Aurora feels the basket doors swing open, and in that instant, her entire world changes. The first sensation is pure freedom, the ability to stretch wings that have been folded for 3 hours, to fill her lungs with the crisp morning air, to feel the sun warm her feathers. But freedom comes with responsibility, and Aurora's response in these first crucial seconds will determine everything that follows. As she bursts from the basket, her heart rate spikes from its resting 150 beats per minute to over 400. Her respiratory system, far more efficient than any mammal's, begins delivering oxygen to flight muscles that will need to sustain her for the next 6 to 8 hours. Her eyes, capable of processing visual information 4 times faster than human eyes, begin scanning the horizon for landmarks, for other birds, for the subtle cues that will guide her home. The first few minutes after release are chaos and beauty combined. Nearly 2,000 birds wheel and circle above the liberation site, their calls creating a symphony that can be heard for miles. Some birds, the eager ones like Titan, immediately strike out in what they believe is the correct direction. Others, like Aurora, take a more measured approach, circling to gain altitude, while their internal navigation systems calibrate and confirm the bearing home. Aurora climbs steadily, her powerful wing beats carrying her in a spiral that gradually widens as she gains height. At 500 feet, she can see for miles in every direction. At 1,000 feet, the landscape begins to reveal its patterns, the way rivers curve, how roads intersect, where forests give way to farmland. At 1,500 feet, she levels off and begins to fly with purpose, her body oriented toward a point on the horizon that exists only in her mind but pulls at her with a force that's impossible to ignore. The science behind what Aurora is experiencing is staggering in its complexity. Her navigation system makes the most sophisticated GPS technology look primitive by comparison. She's using the sun as a compass, but not in the simple way you might imagine. Her internal clock, accurate to within minutes even after the disruption of transport, allows her to compensate for the sun's movement across the sky. As the hours pass and the sun tracks westward, Aurora continuously adjusts her heading to maintain her southwesterly course toward home. But the sun is only one element of her navigation arsenal. Deep within her beak, microscopic crystals of magnetite act as a biological compass, responding to the Earth's magnetic field with sensitivity that scientists are still struggling to fully understand. This magnetic sense gives Aurora a backup navigation system that works even on cloudy days when the sun is hidden. Some researchers believe pigeons can actually see magnetic fields as patterns of light and shadow overlaid on their visual field. Imagine having a GPS display literally painted across your vision, and you begin to understand the remarkable nature of pigeon navigation. 20 minutes into the flight, Aurora has settled into her racing rhythm. Her wing beat frequency has stabilized at around 5 to 6 beats per second, a pace she can maintain for hours. Her breathing has found its pattern. Not the rapid panting of a sprinting mammal, but the steady, efficient rhythm of a creature built for endurance flight. Each breath cycles through a respiratory system so efficient that it extracts oxygen both on inhalation and exhalation, a biological innovation that allows birds to fly at altitudes where mammals would lose consciousness. The landscape below is beginning to change. The agricultural fields near the release point are giving way to a patchwork of forest and farmland, broken by the silver threads of rivers and the geometric lines of highways. Aurora flies at around 1,200 feet now, high enough to see far ahead but low enough to spot the landmarks she needs for navigation. Other birds are visible, some flying alone like she is, others in loose groups that form and dissolve as individual racing strategies play out across the sky. This is where the real test begins. 50 kilometers into the race, Aurora encounters her first serious challenge, a line of thunderstorms building along her intended route. The towering cumulus clouds reach up to 25,000 feet, their dark bellies promising turbulence that could scatter her miles off course or worse. This is a moment where her racing intelligence comes into play. Less experienced birds might try to push through the storms or panic and turn back. Aurora, drawing on 3 years of racing experience, makes a calculated decision to detour around the weather system, adding perhaps 10 kilometers to her journey, but avoiding the potentially race-ending turbulence within the storm cells. The detour takes her over unfamiliar territory, and here we see another remarkable aspect of pigeon navigation in action. Even though she's flying over landscape she's never seen before, Aurora's internal compass keeps her oriented toward home. She adjusts her heading to compensate for the detour, using landmarks visible on the horizon to maintain her overall southwesterly bearing. It's a display of spatial intelligence that would challenge many human navigators equipped with modern technology. As Aurora skirts the storm system, she encounters something that racing pigeon fanciers know all too well, but the general public rarely considers: the presence of predators. A peregrine falcon, the fastest bird in the world, and specialized pigeon hunter, has been tracking the race from above. Peregrines are regular hazards at pigeon races, and they've learned to position themselves along racing routes, picking off birds that become separated from the main groups. The attack comes without warning. The peregrine drops from 3,000 feet at a speed that can exceed 200 miles per hour, its yellow eyes locked onto Aurora as she navigates around the storm system. In that moment, Aurora's survival depends on every instinct honed by millions of years of evolution. She doesn't try to outrun the falcon. That would be impossible. Instead, she executes a series of sharp turns and dives that make her trajectory unpredictable, using her superior maneuverability to avoid the falcon's killing strike. The encounter lasts less than 30 seconds, but it costs Aurora precious energy and takes her further off her intended course. As the frustrated falcon gives up the chase and looks for easier prey, Aurora finds herself alone, disoriented, and forced to re-establish her bearings. This is where the mental toughness of a true racing pigeon shows itself. A lesser bird might panic, might waste energy in frantic flight patterns, might even abandon the race and seek shelter. Aurora, however, takes a moment to circle and climb, using the extra altitude to spot landmarks and reorient herself toward home. 150 kilometers into the race, Aurora has been flying for just over 2 hours. Her body is beginning to feel the effects of sustained flight. The glycogen stores in her flight muscles are depleting, forcing her metabolism to shift toward burning fat reserves. Her core temperature has risen despite the cooling effect of airflow over her body. Most significantly, she's beginning to experience what human athletes would recognize as fatigue, not the crushing exhaustion that ends performance, but the steady accumulation of metabolic byproducts that make each wing beat slightly more difficult than the last. This is where the conditioning from months of training becomes crucial. Aurora's cardiovascular system, developed through countless training flights, delivers oxygen to her muscles with remarkable efficiency. Her flight muscles, comprising nearly 30% of her total body weight, have been conditioned to sustain prolonged effort. Her bones, hollow and lightweight but incredibly strong, provide the structural foundation for flight that would be impossible in heavier terrestrial animals. The landscape below continues to change, and Aurora faces another challenge that will be familiar to anyone who's ever been lost in unfamiliar territory: the absence of reliable landmarks. She's flying over a vast agricultural region where field boundaries shift with the seasons, where the geometric patterns of cultivation can be confusingly similar across wide areas. Without the GPS tracking devices that some races now employ, Aurora's exact position would be unknown to her fancier back home. But those tracking devices, when used, often reveal fascinating detours and hesitations that tell the story of each bird's individual journey. Modern GPS tracking has revolutionized our understanding of what happens during long-distance pigeon races. The data reveals that even the best birds rarely fly in straight lines from release point to home. Instead, their routes are complex curves and angles, responses to weather patterns, terrain features, and navigational decisions that play out in real time across hundreds of kilometers. Some birds fly wide detours around cities, apparently preferring rural landscapes. Others follow river valleys or mountain ranges, using these natural features as navigation aids. Still others seem to follow magnetic anomalies or infrasound patterns that humans can't perceive. Aurora's route, if tracked, would show the effects of her storm detour and falcon encounter, but it would also reveal something else, a remarkable consistency in her overall bearing toward home. Despite the challenges and course corrections, her average heading has remained within a few degrees of the direct line between release point and loft. This consistency in the face of obstacles is one of the hallmarks of a champion racing pigeon. At the 200-kilometer mark, Aurora faces a new challenge: heat. The morning's cool air has given way to the thermal radiation of a summer afternoon. The temperature at her flying altitude has risen to nearly 85 degrees Fahrenheit, and the sun's rays are beating down on her dark blue plumage. Birds don't sweat like mammals do, so Aurora must rely on panting and increased circulation to her unfeathered legs and feet to regulate her body temperature. The heat adds another layer of stress to an already demanding journey. But heat brings one advantage that experienced racing pigeons learn to exploit: thermal lift. As the sun heats the ground unevenly, columns of warm air rise thousands of feet into the atmosphere. Aurora's sensitive flight sensors detect these thermals, and she uses them to gain altitude with minimal energy expenditure. Soaring in a thermal, wings spread wide and motionless, she can rest her flight muscles while still making progress toward home. It's a brief respite in what has become an increasingly demanding test of endurance. 3 hours into the race, at roughly the 250-kilometer point, Aurora encounters something that reveals another remarkable aspect of pigeon navigation: scent. The human sense of smell is so poor compared to other animals that we often forget its importance in navigation, but pigeons can detect and recognize odor patterns from dozens of kilometers away. As Aurora flies over an industrial area with its distinctive chemical signatures, she's actually adding to her navigational database, storing scent information that she might use in future races over similar routes. The interplay between scent navigation and the pigeon's other navigational systems is still being studied by scientists, but it's clear that odor plays a significant role, especially during the final approach to home. Pigeons raised in lofts can recognize the scent signature of their home area from distances that would astound us: the particular combination of vegetation, soil, nearby farms, and human activity that makes each location unique in the olfactory landscape. As Aurora passes the halfway point of her journey, she's joined by another bird she recognizes: Comet, a cock from a loft 50 kilometers from her own. Comet has been flying a parallel course, and now the two birds begin flying together in a loose partnership that will benefit both. Flying with a companion reduces the psychological stress of a long journey and can provide navigational advantages if one bird becomes disoriented. It's not uncommon for racing pigeons to form these temporary alliances during long races, only to compete fiercely against each other in the final kilometers. The partnership with Comet comes at a crucial time because Aurora is about to face one of the most challenging phases of any 500-kilometer race: the mental and physical low point that typically occurs between 300 and 400 kilometers. Her glycogen stores are now largely depleted, forcing her to rely primarily on fat metabolism for energy. Fat provides more energy per gram than carbohydrates, but requires more oxygen to burn, placing additional demands on her respiratory system. Her flight muscles are accumulating lactate and other metabolic byproducts, creating the avian equivalent of what marathon runners call hitting the wall. This is where the champion qualities that make Aurora special begin to show themselves. Lesser birds might slow their pace significantly at this point, or even drop out of the race entirely to rest and recover. Aurora, however, maintains her cruising speed through sheer determination and the conditioning that comes from years of progressive training. Her wing beats remain strong and regular, her navigation remains precise, and her will to reach home remains unbroken. The landscape below has changed again, now showing the familiar patterns of her home region, the specific arrangement of towns and farms, roads and rivers that she's memorized through countless training flights. But familiar doesn't mean easy, and Aurora still faces 150 kilometers of flight before she can rest. The afternoon sun is beginning its descent toward the western horizon, changing the angles of light and shadow that she uses for navigation. Her internal clock adjusts her compass bearing to compensate, a continuous calculation that happens without conscious thought. At 350 kilometers, Aurora and Comet encounter their most serious weather challenge, yet a line of severe thunderstorms directly across their path home. These aren't the scattered cells they encountered earlier, but a solid wall of towering cumulonimbus clouds stretching from horizon to horizon. Lightning flickers within the dark masses, and the radar signature, if visible to the birds, would show wind shears and downdrafts that could prove fatal to aircraft, let alone pigeons. The decision of how to handle this obstacle will determine whether Aurora finishes the race or becomes another casualty of nature's power. Flying through the storms is out of the question. The turbulence would scatter her across miles of territory, assuming she survived the experience at all. Flying over the storms would require climbing to altitudes where oxygen becomes scarce and temperatures drop below freezing. The only viable option is another detour, this time a significant one that will add at least 25 kilometers to her journey. Aurora and Comet, flying together in what seems like mutual agreement, bank to the south to skirt the southern edge of the storm system. The detour takes them over unfamiliar territory once again, testing their navigation skills as lightning flickers ominously to their north, and the smell of rain fills the air. The psychological pressure of flying so close to such violent weather while maintaining course toward home is immense, yet both birds continue with the steady determination that defines their species. The storm detour adds nearly 40 minutes to Aurora's flight time, and when she finally clears the weather system and reestablishes her homeward bearing, she's been in the air for nearly 5 hours. Her body weight has dropped by almost 15% as her energy reserves have been consumed by the demands of sustained flight. Every system in her body is being pushed to its limits. Her heart rate remains elevated, her respiratory rate is higher than normal, and her muscles are operating on the edge of their endurance capacity. Yet there's something remarkable happening as Aurora enters the final 100 kilometers of her journey. Despite her physical fatigue, her navigation becomes more precise, not less. She's entering territory that she knows intimately from training flights, and the familiar landmarks seem to energize her in ways that pure physiology can't explain. The sight of a distinctive water tower 80 kilometers from home, the specific bend in a river she's flown over dozens of times, the arrangement of farm buildings that mark a checkpoint she's memorized. All of these familiar sights seem to provide psychological fuel that helps overcome physical exhaustion. This phenomenon, the final surge of energy that racing pigeons often display when approaching home territory, is one of the most fascinating aspects of long-distance racing. It's as if the birds draw strength from proximity of home, finding reserves of energy that seemed impossible just kilometers earlier. Sports psychologists studying human endurance athletes recognize a similar phenomenon, but in pigeons, it seems even more pronounced. At 75 kilometers from home, Aurora parts company with Comet, whose own loft lies in a different direction. The partnership that sustained both birds through the middle portions of the race dissolves as individual homing instincts take over. Aurora is now flying alone again, but she's no longer the same bird that was released 8 hours earlier. She's been tested by weather, predators, fatigue, and the simple, grinding challenge of maintaining flight for hundreds of kilometers. She's proven herself in ways that can only be proven in competition against the elements and distance. The final 50 kilometers of Aurora's journey reveal another remarkable aspect of pigeon navigation, the increasing precision of their homing ability as they approach familiar territory. While her early navigation relied primarily on sun compass and magnetic compass bearings, Aurora is now using landmark navigation with pinpoint accuracy. She recognizes individual buildings, specific intersections, particular arrangements of fields and forests that guide her along the exact route she's flown during training. But even in these final kilometers, challenges remain. Aurora encounters a flock of local pigeons that try to lead her off course, a common occurrence that racing pigeons must learn to resist. She flies through a brief rain shower that reduces visibility and creates additional cooling stress on her already challenged thermoregulatory system. Most significantly, she faces the growing fatigue that comes from nearly 6 hours of continuous flight. At 25 kilometers from home, Aurora can see the distinctive skyline of her hometown in the distance. The sight provides a psychological boost that's almost tangible. Her flight speed, which had gradually decreased over the past 100 kilometers, suddenly increases again. Her wing beats, which had become slightly labored, regain their smooth efficiency. It's as if the sight of home territory releases one final reservoir of energy specifically saved for this moment. The final 10 kilometers of Aurora's journey are flown at a pace that would have been impossible hours earlier when she was fresh and strong. This is the racing pigeon's equivalent of a marathon runner's finishing kick, except that Aurora's kick covers 10 kilometers at speeds approaching 60 miles per hour. Her heart rate, which had stabilized during the middle portions of the race, spikes again as adrenaline courses through her system. Her vision sharpens as familiar landmarks rush past below. At 5 kilometers from home, Aurora spots her loft. The small cluster of buildings, the distinctive arrangement of the flight pens, the specific angle of approach that she's practiced thousands of times, all of it pulls at her with an irresistible force. She's no longer just flying home. She's racing against time, against her own exhaustion, against the dozen other birds from various lofts who are converging on the same area from their own 500-kilometer journeys. The final approach to the loft is where 6 hours of endurance flight culminates in a burst of speed that spectators find breathtaking. Aurora dives toward her loft entrance at nearly 70 miles per hour, her wings folded back, her body a streamlined projectile aimed at the small opening that represents safety, food, water, and rest. At the last possible moment, she spreads her wings and flares her tail, converting her diving speed into lift that allows her to land with precision on the landing board. David, who has been monitoring the club's timing system and watching the sky with binoculars for the past hour, sees Aurora's distinctive silhouette appear over the tree line and feels his heart rate spike. He recognizes her immediately, not just her coloring, but her flight style, the particular way she approaches the loft, the angle of her wings, as she makes her final approach. As she lands on the timing pad and triggers the electronic clock that records her arrival time, David experiences the mixture of relief, pride, and pure joy that makes all the months of preparation worthwhile. Aurora's time, 6 hours, 23 minutes, and 14 seconds for 500 kilometers, places her among the top 10% of finishers in the race. But more importantly, she's home safe after one of the most demanding tests that nature and human competition can provide. As she steps through the loft entrance and heads immediately for the water fountain, her body language tells the story of her journey. The slight droop of exhaustion, the quick, efficient movements of a bird that knows exactly where everything is, the immediate focus on rehydration and recovery. Within minutes of her arrival, Aurora is drinking deeply from the loft's water system, replacing the fluids lost during 6 hours of intensive flight. Her first drink lasts nearly 2 minutes, an eternity for a bird, as her body begins the process of recovery from one of the most demanding physical challenges she'll ever face. The water is followed by a careful selection of high-energy seeds from the feeding stations, her body instinctively choosing the nutrients needed for recovery. The transformation from racing bird to recovering athlete happens quickly. Within an hour of her arrival, Aurora's heart rate has returned to near normal levels. Her breathing has slowed from the rapid rhythm of sustained flight to the peaceful pattern of rest. Her body temperature, elevated by hours of muscular effort, gradually returns to normal as she rests in the familiar comfort of her home loft. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Aurora's recovery is how quickly she returns to normal behavior. Within 2 hours of completing a 500-kilometer race, she's preening her feathers with the same methodical attention to detail she shows every day. She's interacting normally with her loft mates, showing no signs of the stress or trauma that such a journey might be expected to cause. It's as if the race, as demanding as it was, represents a natural expression of her capabilities rather than an artificial challenge imposed by human competition. The GPS data from Aurora's race, when analyzed later, reveals the full story of her journey. Her total distance flown was actually 547 kilometers due to the weather detours and falcon encounter. Her average speed, calculated from release to arrival, was just over 85 kilometers per hour, remarkable when you consider that this includes time spent circling at the release point, navigating around storms, and recovering from the predator encounter. Her peak speeds, recorded during the final approach to the loft, exceeded 110 kilometers per hour. More fascinating than the raw statistics, however, are the patterns revealed by the GPS tracking. Aurora's route shows the subtle course corrections she made throughout the flight, the way she adjusted her heading to compensate for wind drift, the precision with which she navigated around obstacles, and back to her original bearing. The data reveals a level of navigational sophistication that continues to amaze researchers studying pigeon flight. Over the following days, Aurora's recovery follows a predictable pattern that experienced racing pigeon fanciers know well. The first 24 hours are focused on rest and rehydration. Her appetite returns gradually, and she shows a particular preference for high-fat seeds that will help rebuild her energy reserves. By the second day, she's back to normal activity levels, preening, bathing, and interacting with her loft mates as if the 500-kilometer race were just another training flight. But Aurora has been changed by her experience in ways that aren't immediately visible. Her confidence has grown. The knowledge that she can complete such a demanding journey and find her way home from 500 kilometers away. Her physical conditioning has been pushed to new levels, creating adaptations that will serve her well in future races. Most importantly, she's added to her navigational database, storing memories of landmarks, weather patterns, and route variations that she might use in races yet to come. The race has also deepened the bond between Aurora and David in ways that are difficult to quantify, but easy to observe. There's a trust that develops between fancier and bird when they've shared the experience of long-distance competition, when the fancier has prepared the bird to the best of his ability, and the bird has responded by giving everything she has to get home. It's a partnership that goes beyond the simple relationship between human and animal. It's a collaboration in pursuit of excellence that benefits both participants. As we reflect on Aurora's journey, from the quiet preparation the night before the race through the explosive moment of release, across 500 kilometers of varied terrain and challenging conditions, to the triumphant arrival home, we're witnessing something that represents one of nature's most remarkable achievements. The ability of a 500-gram bird to navigate across hundreds of kilometers of unfamiliar territory and return home with pinpoint accuracy is a feat that challenges our understanding of biology, psychology, and the very nature of intelligence itself. If you've enjoyed following Aurora's journey through this 500-kilometer race, I encourage you to subscribe to our channel for more in-depth explorations of the remarkable world of racing pigeons. Your subscription helps us create content that celebrates these incredible birds and the dedicated people who race them. And please take a moment to like this video if you found Aurora's story as captivating as I do. It helps other pigeon enthusiasts discover content like this. I'd love to hear about your own experiences with long-distance pigeon racing. Have you witnessed birds returning from races that seemed impossible? Have you seen your own birds overcome challenges that tested every aspect of their abilities? Share your stories in the comments below. Each race has its own drama, its own moments of triumph and challenge, and every story adds to our collective understanding of these remarkable athletes. Aurora's race represents just one story among thousands that play out every weekend during racing season. Each bird that takes to the sky in competition carries with it the hopes of its fancier, the legacy of its bloodline, and the remarkable biological heritage that makes such journeys possible. Some will face greater challenges than Aurora faced, more severe weather, longer detours, more persistent predators. Others will have easier journeys, with favorable winds and clear skies, guiding them home ahead of schedule. But every bird that completes a 500-kilometer race deserves our admiration and respect. They're demonstrating capabilities that humans can barely comprehend, navigating by systems we're still trying to understand, displaying endurance that would challenge our best athletes. They're living proof that evolution has created wonders that continue to amaze us, even in our age of technological sophistication. The silent courage of racing pigeons like Aurora, their willingness to launch themselves into the sky and fly for hours across unfamiliar territory, facing whatever challenges nature puts in their path, driven by an inexorable pull toward home, represents something profound about the relationship between humans and animals. We provide the care, the training, the opportunity for competition. They provide the heart, the wings, and the navigational genius that makes it all possible. As Aurora settles into her evening routine, her 500-kilometer race now a memory encoded in her remarkable brain, she represents not just a successful competitor, but a living example of the extraordinary capabilities that exist in the natural world around us. Her journey reminds us that there are still mysteries to be solved, wonders to be appreciated, and partnerships between humans and animals that enrich both species in ways we're only beginning to understand. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Aurora's race. Thank you for your interest in these remarkable birds and the sport that celebrates their incredible abilities. And thank you for being part of a community that recognizes and appreciates the quiet heroism of racing pigeons who launch themselves into the sky with nothing but their instincts, their training, and their unshakable desire to come home. Until next time, Keep watching the skies, and remember that every pigeon you see overhead might be in the middle of its own epic journey, navigating by systems we can barely imagine, driven by instincts older than human civilization, carrying within its small body capabilities that continue to humble and amaze us all.